Well, for those of you who have been attending Mass lately, is that most of you, I presume, you may have noticed that there's a consistent theme in the Gospel readings in recent weeks. Anybody know what that theme is? Bread. Thanks, Tom. Okay. It is bread, yeah. Well, today, we have the living bread, and prior Sundays we had the bread of life and multiplication of the loaves and that holy cocktail hour, and the folks were all sitting around the lawn waiting for something in terms of dinner to happen. Remember that? So, what do you think I'm going to talk about today? No? Not water. What do you think? No? Bread?
Bread.
Wrong. Okay. All right. All I have to say about that is that I agree with everything that was said about bread in the previous homilies, and I agree with Jesus, and I think it's a good idea for everyone to receive Holy Communion. And that's the end of my homily. Yeah. You think, huh? All right. Well, all seriousness aside, as comedian Steve Allen used to say, there is, as usual, so much richness in this short gospel passage from St. John. And, no matter how many words we use, how often we talk about it, we can never adequately plumb the depths of the mystery of Jesus giving himself to us in the Eucharist. But there was something else that jumped out from the page as I read this gospel, and I think it's worth our consideration. It's what the people did when they heard Jesus. And what did those people do when they heard the words of Jesus? What did they do? This is what they did, quote, "They quarreled among themselves, saying, 'How can this man give us his flesh to eat?'" Can you believe that? I mean, here they have Jesus himself giving them inside information on what they need to do to live forever, and they quarrel among themselves. I don't know about you folks, but I, for one, am glad that I live in a time and an age when we believers never quarrel among ourselves. I mean, I'm so grateful that we listen to the teaching of Jesus and we say, "Right on, Jesus, you the man. I do believe." Let me hear you say that, "I do believe." It's amazing what you can get people to do. Okay. All right, okay. All right. Well, I love the unanimity of belief, purpose, action that we Christians enjoy today. And I love the way that we are way smarter than those silly people who quarrel among themselves when they heard the teachings of Jesus and his church. It's really so wonderful that we all agree on the social and moral issues of our times. How wonderful it is that we live in a church that is in agreement with Jesus' teaching on this one: love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Now, we don't quarrel among ourselves and say, "How can this man say such a thing?" We understand that there are some really, really bad people out there that we should protect ourselves from, of course, and we nonetheless never relish the thought of taking revenge on them. And when he says, "Do not kill," we don't quarrel among ourselves about what that means in regard to war and capital punishment and euthanasia and the notion of life as a seamless garment from conception to natural death. So thank God that we are all in agreement on those issues of vital importance. And when Jesus tells us to take care of each other by selling what we have and giving it to the poor, I'm so glad that we Christians don't quarrel among ourselves about what that means. God forbid. If we did quarrel among ourselves about that, we'd never achieve meaningful things like health care reform that would make it possible for working poor to have health insurance for themselves and their children, as though they need it. Jeez, okay. And when Jesus bids us to welcome the stranger, I'm really grateful for that advice, because it makes it so easy for us to be all of one mind and one heart when it comes to immigration law reform. Otherwise, we'd be quarreling among ourselves like those silly people 2,000 years ago. And I'm so glad that Jesus showed us how to be inclusive in the Good Samaritan story. Now, if it wasn't for that, we'd be quarreling among ourselves about who would be welcome at our community. And we all know that we are of like mind and our attitudes about those strangers who are different from us. You know, like those who are gay, or like those who are a different skin color of us, or those who are more liberal, or those who are more conservative. You know, if we weren't all of like mind, we'd probably be arguing about things like, you know, whether our president is actually a citizen of the United States. You know, whether he was born in, you know, Kansas or Hawaii or Kenya or, you know, someplace like that. No, we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't quarrel among ourselves like those silly people did when Jesus tried to tell them that all they needed to do to become the people they were destined to do before they turned from him and began to quarrel among themselves. So I'm so glad that we don't quarrel among ourselves. I'm so glad that we accept the teachings of Jesus even when we can't make complete sense of some of them. Now, why do we do that? Well, we do that because we trust his authority. In his Discourse on Reason, C.S. Lewis writes that there are three elements in the process of reasoning. First, there's the reception of the facts to reason about. And second is intuition, and that's the perception of self-evident truths, like if A and B both equal C, then they equal each other. You don't prove that, you just believe it. Third is the art or the skill of arranging the facts to produce the truth or falsehood of the proposition that's being considered. Now, concerning that first element, reception of the facts, Lewis says something, and on first reading I found kind of odd. And as I thought about it, it made sense. He said 99% of what we accept as facts depend on authority. It depends on our learning about those facts from a source that we can trust. Now, when I think about it, I see the truth in that. My formal education from kindergarten through graduate school was based on what others had to teach me through books, lessons, and through their personal experiences. And then the values that I have and the prejudices that I have, both the good and the bad, were largely learned in a subliminal way in my childhood from my family of origin, my school, my peers, and in my church. And when I experience a shift in my thinking today as a 64-year-old man, it's always because I have been influenced by an authority figure that I trust, authority figure that I respect. Sure, I still have to use my intuition because I can't escape that. And I might have to do some really hard work in arranging the facts into the view of reality that I have constructed over a lifetime of learning and experience. But I accept the new facts because I respect the authority from which they came. And to me, that's the whole deal. Jesus says that this common bread and this common wine are his body and his blood. He says I must eat it and drink it if I wish to live forever. I don't really understand that in the same way I understand that if I decide to give up food and drink for the next year, the chances of my being around here next summer are pretty slim. No pun intended. I just thought of that, okay? But if I trust Jesus as an authoritative spokesman for God because he is God, and if God is the ultimate source of all that is real, which I somehow know intuitively, then I don't need to quarrel with anyone who does not believe in the authority of Jesus. Now, make no mistake about it. There always have been and there always will be those who claim to speak for Jesus with authority. And time and our own common sense have later proven these people to be misguided at best and self-serving charlatans at worst. Knowing with certitude which authority figures throughout all of human history in the past 2,000 years have been absolutely right in their interpretation of Jesus' teaching is above my pay grade. I'm just a deacon. I'll leave that to our priests and our bishops. And as Father Gary said a few weeks ago, that's another homily. I do trust the authority of the creed that we proclaim on Sundays, and I do trust the authority in our ancient belief that Jesus is truly present in this bread and in this wine. And I trust that I must eat it and drink it. So if any of you want to quarrel among yourselves about that, you'll have to leave me out and just quarrel among yourselves. Now, I'll try to listen respectfully on the sidelines, But I really have nothing to say about that other than that I trust Jesus, and I believe in Him. In the words of Forrest Gump, that's all I'm going to say about that.